On almost every team, there are athletes who want to succeed, who look physically capable, who understand the game, but something isn't clicking. They're inconsistent, they overreact, they struggle to execute, and too often they get labeled lazy, unfocused, or uncoachable. But what if the issue isn't effort, but processing? Today, we're diving into Reach Every Athlete, a guide to coaching players with hidden disabilities and conditions by Christopher Stanley and Timothy Baghurst. This book challenges the one-size-fits-all coaching model and argues that many breakdowns in sports aren't about discipline failures, but they're understanding the failures. The solution isn't lowering expectations. It's coaching with more precision. Let's get into it. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining. All right, let's kick it off. If you could, Tim, could you provide us a little bit more about your background and how this all came to be and then how you and Chris met?
Yeah, I'm at Florida State University. I run a Center for Athletic Coaching here, been here since 2019. And I met Chris almost accidentally, right, Chris? We were both at FSU at the time, and we discovered almost accidentally we had an interest in sports psychology and mental performance and just helping athletes get better. And from my perspective, helping coaches get better to help those athletes get better. And so we met up, we started communicating, we started talking about our different experiences in working with athletes and coaches. And it kind of went on from there to understanding that we both realized that we sometimes work with people who have challenges in their performance, whether it be from a coach's perspective or an athlete's perspective. And these things weren't necessarily identified in a normal setting where coaches may not recognize an athlete is struggling with something. They just assume the athlete can't do it. They don't really investigate why they can't do it. And there may be a very simple reason for that goes beyond the athlete just not understanding. That led us to, you know what, there's not much literature out there about this. We have a lot of literature on working with athletes with very recognizable disabilities or challenges, such as going to the Paralympics as an example. But when we talk about something such as autism or color blindness, there really isn't that much out there to help coaches, one, recognize that these athletes may have these specific challenges, and two, if they do, what do you do about it? How do you coach them?
Yeah, makes sense. And just the athletes that you're referring to are all age groups, correct?
Yes, and I would say that often the coaches can be the first ones to identify that there's a problem. And I'll give you an example. I was coaching. I use the word coaching loosely. Under 6, I think it was under 6 soccer. My son was playing, and of course, what happens is you're a parent. Oh, you know sports. You can be the coach. We won't even get into that discussion about what volunteer coaching looks like. But we had a player who was playing and seemed very distracted compared to everyone else. Would stop in the middle of the game and start digging in the dirt. Or one time tried to run off with the goalposts. And as a coach, like, what are you doing? Stop that. No, focus on this. Go to this position. You chase the ball here, kick the ball in this net. And they really struggled to stay on task along with everyone else. And the parents themselves didn't see anything wrong. And I use the term wrong carefully here because there's nothing wrong with that. But they didn't see that there was a difference between their child and the rest of the children. And that may have been because they hadn't been in a school setting yet. Maybe a teacher hadn't recognized that they're not learning the same way, or they can't concentrate the same way. So it was really my conversation with them that started this discussion of, have you noticed anything different with your child and their siblings? Or have you noticed how distracted they are when we're practicing or when we're playing games? Is that how they normally are at home? To start to recognize that this child may have some developmental challenges that I need to know about. And if I know about them, I can develop a strategy for this in the way I coach. But if the parents don't even know, sometimes it's the coaches that are the first to go, you know what, this is This is atypical from what we normally see. And so I think that's really important for coaches to be aware of this, even at a very young age.
And then before we get in Chris, over to you for a second, I think the other thing too is you brought up the word different, and the concept of that word and sometimes has a negative connotation, right?
Very much.
But
Yeah.
then we also hear the athlete is different, and we talk about all the amazing qualities that they have, or maybe that their neurodivergence maybe allows them to have, which actually can be celebrated and can help them build confidence in certain situations. But coaches don't necessarily get to that point. Even the youth coach may not even get to that point because, like what you're saying, they may not even give them the opportunity to show how amazing a certain quality could be because they're so caught up in, oh, well, this kid's not listening, or he's having trouble keeping his hands to himself, or whatever the case may be. So it's like blending that all together is something that's an interesting thing to take away too, and see these youth coaches struggle with.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Different doesn't mean bad. Different can mean very, very good because they may be able to do things or think a different way to everyone else. And you look at how maybe they perceive a field of players, and they can see things that normal's the wrong word, typical athletes may not see because that's just how their brain works. And because of that, you can almost take advantage of that because they can help you because you may not see what they're seeing. And you may be frustrated of why you're trying to do this. Well, they may be thinking 3 steps ahead and everyone else around them is thinking 1 step ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So there are definitely opportunities for that. I would also say as well that some of these athletes may hide whatever they're struggling with. And you as a coach may not identify that until even adult level where they've managed to just cover it up. Maybe they're hard of hearing. And so they've deliberately stood near you as a coach to hear what's going on, and you never even realized. And so when you're screaming on a field, hopefully not screaming, but shouting instructions on a field so that everybody hears, they're on the far side of the field. They may not hear it. And then you're frustrated at them because they didn't do what you told them, but they didn't know because they didn't hear what you told them. So we have to recognize as coaches that some of these athletes may have never said anything or covered it up because they don't feel comfortable telling you. And that may not be your fault. That may be the fault of previous coaches they've worked with who have maybe not been as well receptive to an athlete approaching them like that. So it really depends on the environment and the situation that these athletes are in. Hopefully as a coach, you are very open and willing to listen to those athletes so that they are willing to come to you and say, hey, coach, I have this problem. I need to talk to you about it. Can you help me with it? And you're able to support that situation rather than make it a problem.
For sure. My son, one thing that my son does when he's anxious or nervous about a game or, he gets quiet. Mm-hmm. And it comes across maybe as he's disinterested or he's, just not perceived as like, hey, get ready to go, buddy. Get hyped up. You're about to get in the game. Like we need your energy here. But it doesn't affect his performance once he gets on the field, but it's the perception that is being created around him that maybe the coach is saying, oh, maybe he's not ready because he's kind of shutting down, but he's just nervous. And that's how he shows nervousness and anxiousness. So, but again, the coach being able to see that and push them over that speed bump to then get them into the environment that is most conducive for the way their brain works, kind of see that step ahead. Like, hey, if I can push them over this threshold and get them onto the field, get them into the environment that's going to bring them that confidence, bring them that social, that just the friendships, all those things, like just getting them there, is a huge part of the battle.
Yeah, 2 things, and then I'll let Chris take some airtime. From a coach's perspective, a couple of questions you need to ask early on when you're working with your athletes is, one, how do you like to be coached? That is something that is not asked enough. We have to recognize as coaches, we can't coach everybody the same way. and alluding to your son, a coach needs to know that. So instead of asking them, get motivated, what's wrong with you, et cetera, you understand this is how they operate. This is okay. And I'm going to treat you differently to I treat the person next to you, because I know how you like to be coached and what you need from me. And the second thing as well, beyond just doing physical assessments of injuries, et cetera, is there anything that I need to know about you that can help me do a better job coaching you? Is there anything about you that I need to know so that I can support your needs? And that obviously changes based on the age of the athlete and the relationship you have with them, but they're never going to tell you that they're colorblind or something like that if you've never asked them. It's rare that an athlete is going to come up to you and tell you something out of the blue like that.
Yeah.
No, these are things that you need to prod and ask. And if they don't trust you, they're not telling you anything. So it really all boils down to having that relationship with the athlete where you are there to support and help them. And then the more information you're given, the more you can do that.
And I think too, at a younger age, particularly, it's about the coach being able to have a relationship with the parents also of that athlete.
Yes.
As we get older and we start talking about, the 18 to 22-year-olds in college, maybe that's not as prevalent, and it's more obviously on the athlete and the coach and their relationship, and the parents maybe aren't as involved. But at the younger ages, I think it's the framework and the foundation that's built around the kid from their parents to the coach. It's going to help create that environment that's most conducive.
Agreed.
For sure. All right. So Chris, thanks for joining as well.
Happy to be here.
All right. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my background, and Tim was right on. There was kind of an accidental type connection years ago. Might have a bit of the small town effect that Tallahassee and Florida State can exert. Small town, small campus. And we had certainly some shared interest in the athletic space, mental performance space. Tim a bit heavier in kind of a coaching background, me a bit more sport and performance psychology. Although from a athletic and coaching perspective, I have particularly more recently been a assistant track and field coach at a local high school. And so when we layer my sport and performance psychology background, in terms of like academics and I'm, by the way, I should mention I'm full-time faculty at University of Western States in their sport and performance psych program. But when you layer my writing and research and teaching in that area on top of coaching, on top of, being a sport parent times 3, couple track and field athletes, including a pole vaulter, youngest son is a baseball player. So we're navigating that space, and that's not a background that I have. I'm too much track and field, frankly. Sometimes I think, but having the lived experience as a coach, being exposed to neurodivergent athletes, but then also the parent of neurodivergent athlete as well, and just you kind of put that together, and that was part of kind of the shared experience and interest that when Tim and I came together, there was also the shared identification that there are limited resources for key stakeholders in these spaces, those stakeholders that are connected to youth and developing athletes, including neurodivergent athletes. But how can they be more adequately equipped to be able to identify signs and symptoms that may be impacting participation and performance and recognize them as something that isn't problematic? It's a processing difference that just needs to be approached and perhaps managed in a different way, but also be equipped to be able to pivot to other methods and ideas and communication techniques with that athlete, or triangulated amongst others, including families, to kind of co-produce, again, methods, ideas, techniques that could be more conducive to their participation and performance. And One more thing I'll say, and then I'll let a bit more of the dialogue pick up again. But some of what you both were talking about earlier reminds me of the difference between terms that sound similar on the surface, but like the difference between neurodiversity and neurodivergence. We are all neurodiverse. We're all in that space in the same way. Our brains process things differently in the same way that we bring different, like, raw athletic skills and capabilities and talents to the table. We're all neurodiverse. But then there's this neurodivergent piece, and that tends to be what differentiates like the neurotypical and neurodivergent. And neurodivergent is what tends to be more what we consider like the hidden disabilities when you talk about ADHD or some on the autism spectrum, or like learning disabilities. And there's a variety of others in the book that we cover. But those that I guess more classically, I don't know if that's the right word, impact processing in like recognizable ways. But part of my point with all this is that a lot of the ideas and techniques that coaches ideally could be equipped to pivot to better approach neurodivergence are really workable and functional just with working more broadly with just a neurodiverse. You don't have to turn your coaching technique or schedule on its side to be able to be better equipped to handle neurodivergent athletes when they're in your space or exposed to them. So I'll stop there with my intro.
No, I am curious though about those techniques, and I guess what are the gaps that you both have seen that have triggered you both to say, hey, there could be some implementation of certain techniques here that could work much better for coaches at all levels, right? Because again, it's two angles here, right? It's not only the youth coaches and the higher level coaches, but then it's obviously, the parents who are volunteering their time to coach as well, who may not have the, athletic background, they're just volunteering their time. So what are some of those things you guys have seen work?
So if I can say at the outset, maybe some like foundational things, and I think this was part of the book motive behind it, but was just at a certain level being able to recognize what it could be. And as a coach, and this is something I struggle with and have to catch myself as a coach. I'm not up here on some aspirational ivory tower when it comes to this. I still struggle with it. But not being just purely reactionary when someone's not paying attention and seems distracted. They aren't following through with guidelines or instructions that you gave them for a particular drill sequence or whatever else it may be, or sequence of practice where you wanted that, whatever it might be. Recognizing that it could be something else, and it's almost like that timeout, and you're just not purely reactionary. And part of the book is related to that, being able to recognize signs and symptoms. But two, knowing that, and this is kind of a foundational thing that as a coach, but as an educator too, knowing effective means of communicating with that athlete and co-producing with them and their families, if applicable. Their families vary with responsiveness and whatnot, but being able to communicate with them what's going on in practice, in terms of their participation and performance, but also opening that up into what has worked in other settings at home or at school. Those are two of the other big settings. What else has worked, and could we apply that in any way to this athletic, whether practice or like competition type scenarios? One of the biggest predictors of what could be successful in the future is what has been successful in the past. And so why would you not if it's available, want to lean into that. And I do want to say, again, part of that might be aspirational. As a volunteer assistant coach, do you have time for broader communication, long talks and planning sessions, almost like IEPs with every athlete? That may be challenging, but are there other creative ways that you can do that? And I'll throw one out there, Derek, and something that I found useful as a coach. For my athletes, and I have about 15 to 20 in my event group. So this might get more difficult if I had 100, but 15 to 20, I purchase bulk notebooks and I hand them out at the beginning of the season to my athletes. And I engage in a schedule of giving them a prompt, then recollecting them. I make notes in there. I give them another prompt, give them time to respond to that, assess them, whatever it might be. I recollect, I take notes. One of my initial prompts in the season is I give them like a table that they fill out and they assess themselves in a variety of areas. And it could be motivational areas. It could be about sleep and rest. It could be about nutrition, hydration. It can be about like paying attention and like attention, whatnot. You rate yourself just simply and invite their families to help them assess these things. Recollect it, make notes. That is a way to start dialogue, whether their parents help them fill those out and I'm aware of that, or when I see them at a meet or a practice, then I can be like, oh, so-and-so, rated them a 4 out of 10 on this area. And I was actually noticing that. Is there anything, attentionally, I have noticed that I can kind of get off task sometimes with that, or maybe time management is another one that I assess on. So there are ways to stimulate and prompt that conversation, but enlisting that communication and triangulation with parents and families is so incredibly helpful. And then you kind of have them on the back end if you need them to be a support for the athlete in, well, maybe we want to try like a checklist app. Let's get that on your phone so we can be prompted throughout the day to hydrate, or remember to put your spikes in your in your backpack. And so we don't have to deal with that, after school, whatnot. So, but anyway, to circle back, at an initial level, just recognizing it could be something else. So having that knowledge and just really engaging in some level of self-reflection where you're not completely reactionary as a coach or an individual, but also being ready to enlist support and communication in some way that makes sense for you. And I think that quickly takes you to a space where you're going to co-produce ideas and strategies, even if it's just one thing initially with the athlete. And I'll stop there.
Yep. Tim, do you have anything to add on that?
Just very briefly, organizationally, we need more support from, whether it be the Parks and Rec department, whether it be from the club team organization, to really train coaches to start looking out for things that might be problematic, so that we are more proactive rather than reactive. And that's one of the challenges globally that I've seen in coach education, particularly in the US, where we as coaches are just seriously undertrained. And we can't expect coaches as volunteers to go, I should go and learn how to look for hidden disabilities and conditions I might not know about. That's not realistic. Instead, how helpful would it be, for example, if that Parks and Rec department had a very even basic training on how to coach at the beginning of a season? I've even offered to do those for free to Parks and Rec departments who've told me no because nobody will come. Well, we've got a problem there. So then all of a sudden we're expecting these coaches to be able to work with somebody who is maybe a little bit different, either physically or developmentally, to the rest of the group, when they don't even know how to run a warm up. It's unlikely to happen. So from from a top-down approach, wouldn't it be great if that Parks and Rec department had a little cheat sheet that they could give out? Here are some things to look out for while you're coaching that may suggest that you talk with their parents about this. Mm-hmm. So that if they do happen, oh yeah, I read something about that, let me go talk to the parent. The second thing I think is potentially valuable is just having those conversations with parents, which most coaches are working with adolescents or pre-adolescents. Have conversations with those parents, just like you would in school. You have a PTA meeting or a parent-teacher meeting. Okay, how about a parent-teacher or a parent-coach meeting? And have those meetings at the beginning of the season and even during the season, as Chris alluded to. Hey, I've noticed these things. How do you handle them at home? Because I want to be able to work with Abigail a little bit better. And I struggle in this area. Do you have any suggestions for me? Because parents often know best. And so having that open communication with parents, but then also encouraging the sports organizations themselves to really, really start thinking about this. Recognize that if you are coaching, there is a very, very good chance you're working with somebody with some kind of challenge, whether it be physical or mental, developmental. Very, very good chance, just statistically speaking. If you're not prepared for that, how do you help them? How do you help them succeed? How does your team succeed? Mm-hmm. So we have to reimagine this more as a top-down rather than a bottom-up. Let's hope all the coaches, the millions of them out there in the U.S. who are doing this as volunteers, let's hope they just figure it out. That's not the way to do it.
Let me ask you both this question. So, let's say you're coaching a team of 12 athletes, and perhaps there's obviously a percentage, let's say 4 or 5 of them that are neurodivergent athletes, whether they are diagnosed or not. How or what would your suggestions be for coaches on how to approach it and structure those practices in a way that doesn't come across as expectations are being lowered for just the neurodivergent athletes? So how are we able to still hold them to the high standard, but still keep in mind? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a fundamental question of just skill too, where as a coach, if you have a group and some are low skill and some are high skill, how do you incorporate them all into the same practice? This is a similar question. And the reality is that in athletics, we are trying to be successful. We are trying to win. And anyone that says that under eights don't keep score, I promise you they do. We all know they do, as do the coaches. We're all trying to be successful, but we also have to do it in a way, especially at the developmental level, where everybody gets opportunity to learn, to grow, to developmentally progress. So it's a tough balance. There's a couple ways to do this, but there is nothing wrong with separating out your team into different levels of skill during practice. There's nothing wrong with that. Do the low skill know that they're in the low skill group? Yes. Is that a problem? Only if you make it one. Only if you essentially identify them. Okay, low skill group over here. Yeah, we're going to have a problem with that. But there is nothing wrong with having similar skill athletes working together to develop their skills. I coach now. I do exactly the same thing. Do the athletes who happen to be adults, do they know this? Yes. But if I place high skill with low skill, what happens? High skill's frustrated, low skill's frustrated. That doesn't mean to say I never put them together, because I do, but I don't do it for extended periods because I know that will happen. I can't practice my skill because you can't do what I need to in order for me to be successful. And so we're all not happy. So there's nothing wrong with splitting up your groups into different levels of skill development. It's just how you do it and the way you express it. And I think if you're demonstrating that we are all at different levels and we're all trying to get better, and some of you are other levels that are higher than others, that's okay. And we've got to cheer each other as we all try to progress because we're a team.
I appreciate Tim saying that, because that was a very validating message for me as a coach, because I do split my group into what I call high mileage and low mileage groups. Is mileage a differentiator? Absolutely. But there's, beneath that, those high mileage athletes that are handling more mileage on the day, each day for easy runs or recovery runs, but also more intervals. Like, they're just more experienced, so they can handle, drills and other, techniques and whatnot, more than low mileage, which is comprised more of athletes that are beginners. Frankly, they don't run cross country in the fall, and they might not have been conditioning in the fall, and they're just new generally to track and field and athletics. But what that also does is, and I'll stick with your example of 12 athletes, what separating them into, and it doesn't have to be 100% separation. There's certain activities, whether that's warm-ups or drills or maybe, speed development, resistance belt type stuff we could do together. There's room for that. But in certain activities, splitting them up, it also gives you, for me, a more manageable ratio for the athletes in particular that might need a little more attention or instruction. You're going to need to double down on verbal instructions, or you're going to need to model things for them multiple times, or try to give them some other type of visual. Maybe there's some video recording where they can watch themselves. Yep. So it also breaks apart the numbers, and for me gives you a more manageable ratio. And again, I'm only speaking into how I can do it and the activities that I find work well as a larger group, and where things can separate a bit. But so that would differ depending upon the coach and the sport or the event, how they could handle that. But there is room for that. And I imagine as the numbers climb in terms of we're talking about 12, 15 here, but I imagine as the numbers climb into dozens or, 75, 80, whatever it may be, athletes on a team, like, it may become increasingly important to try to find ways to give slightly more direct attention, but that would be brought out in smaller group scenario.
Yeah, I think a couple of things that I would do when I was coaching at the Division I baseball level, but also then now at the youth level for 9-year-olds, it's giving an overview of what we are going to be doing proactively, so that the transition periods go better and the kids know what to expect going into it. And also, to your point, physically showing or using other players as examples to show the drills or show exactly what we are going to be doing always seems to go a little bit better versus maybe me trying to show or telling them verbally what it is we're going to be doing. So the actual, visual behind it always seems to go better. I want to ask this question when it comes to the need to constructively criticize or discipline in a way, or have a teachable moment with an athlete. Is there any kind of a takeaway that a coach could get from you guys that may work better versus, obviously we don't want to scream and yell at the athlete, but are there certain approaches that can be taken that have, let's just say, have benefited better?
Yeah. Well, first, if we don't want to scream and yell at an athlete, why do so many coaches do it?
Right.
That's a separate discussion. But I do, before we go on to that, I do want to say one thing back to the previous discussion. When there is nothing wrong with a high skill working with a low skill, because a high skill can develop a lot of leadership opportunities and a lot of even just connection with that low skill as part of a team. So don't always separate them. Just don't do it. Don't have them together all the time. The second thing is when you put two two players who are struggling together, or it doesn't even have to be two, it can be a small group or whatever it is. When you address them, you're now not singling out one person. And if you have a low skill and a high skill working together, it's a lot harder as a coach to provide feedback to the high skill at the same level as the low skill when the low skill is doing so much more wrong. And so all of a sudden they feel like they're being singled out. Oh, they're always picking on me. Coach is always picking on me. Coach is always criticizing me. Whereas when you have a group, rather than going, Derek, I need, you're not doing this. I need you to do this. You pull the group together. Okay, here's what I'm seeing in general. Here's what I want you to all think about over the next 5 minutes on this drill. And now Derek doesn't feel like he's always picking on me. I'm always the failure. You can work with athletes in a less direct way so that they're hearing it and it doesn't necessarily feel like it's always on them.
And I would say, can I just add something to that too? I think on the opposite, when we talk about also looking for opportunities then to find a positive. Mm-hmm. And it could be it could be something small. It could be the smallest win that we as coaches observed this athlete doing that maybe their teammates didn't, but we're going to recognize them for it publicly. And we're going to help them build themselves up, build their confidence, and let their teammates know that, they may have their challenges or their struggles, but at the same time, here's what they're doing really well. And we're going to make sure that you all know they're doing this really well, so that you all can then, compliment them when you see it now moving forward. And that creates more of a, more of a cohesive environment when I think about that. But go ahead. I just wanted to add that in there.
No, you're right on, Derek. And it's when you were originally asking your question about, when you have these teaching moments or, what's your discipline or punishment, right? And trying to be as tactful or as developmentally appropriate as you can. As a coach, I think as a parent, as an educator in a variety of circumstances, you are in a much better position to have those conversations and also guide or redirect behavior when there has been reinforcement of positive leading up into that point. And this is something, again, transparent. I struggle with too. I think there are so many opportunities where we could just small things we could point out like, yep, that was good. That's exactly what I wanted. You're doing that the right way. Like point that out, like draw attention to that person, even in one-on-one or like group settings. And then when it gets to the point, if something goes awry or needs redirecting, there's not this imbalance of, oh, coach has said nothing except when I do something wrong. You don't want to establish that communication pattern when, and that's where things go from 0 to just negative. There can be a better balance. And so as a coach, I think if you are a bit more, aware of, just make that part of your coaching style. Even if you don't think it's that relevant or important, it may be to that athlete. And it may be time well spent to just say, it may seem small. Maybe they just attached the harness belt the right way. Like, yep, that's exactly what you needed to do right there. Maybe they didn't kick over an agility hurdle and you think that should be par for the course, that they could get over this really, but it's like, no, that was great. It's exactly what we want. But yeah, that kind of balance and just try to make that part of your style, like set your own goals. Like I want to have, 5 positive comments to any like negative or redirect type thing. And that doesn't really answer the item you had about the punishment, but I think it just puts you in a better spot communicatively and rapport wise with an athlete if and when those things do come. And if I could briefly answer your question more directly, I try to ignore the negative behavior first to the degree it's possible. If it's like a safety issue, I can't, ignore that. If they're misusing a piece of equipment, someone's about to get hurt, then yeah, I might need to go directly to my loud voice, just to stop that. But if it's lesser than that, I try to ignore it first and If it doesn't go away, then it's, Tim offered some techniques. We could do like certain ways that don't make the athlete feel singled out. But, if you do have some one-on-one time later with the athlete, the opponent side, you understand, some of the, why, that particular behavior or sequence of behaviors, don't work out well. So next time we do that, let's try to do it the right way. Let's, try to follow instructions. And I'll let you know if you have questions, let me know, but let's try to do it, a certain prescribed way.
Yeah. I have two more questions, guys. One is,
hold on, Derek. Can I just finish on this really quickly?
Absolutely.
Chris made a good point about ignoring things. And when I was teacher training, we call that tactical ignorance. You see things, you don't like them, you choose not to address them because they are not to the point where it interferes with practice or interferes with what's going on. Secondly, in relation to feedback, when you are giving feedback can be both negative, i.e. constructive, or it can be positive. We can talk a lot about different ways to give feedback, but one of the things you need to be able to do is explain the why, because a lot of athletes will be either critiqued or praised, not understanding why they were critiqued or praised. And if you don't understand why, how can you either correct it or repeat what it is that you're trying to do? That goes into the punishment, which I'm really cautious about using that word. I prefer more correction rather than punishment. But when you're working with athletes who may be struggling developmentally, mentally, even physically, why do you think I stopped play here? Why do you think I pulled you out? Why do you think I'm trying to correct you on this? If they don't understand the why, it's almost punitive punishment because they don't know. You're just making me go run laps, which, by the way, I highly, highly do not recommend. But you're just making me go run laps. I have no idea why. I did something wrong. I can't do it again. I don't know what I did wrong. How am I going to do it again? Or not do it again? So we have to really understand or make them understand that this is what I expected of you. This is what you did. Therefore, this is what I want to see in future, or this is what you need to do now to correct that behavior or action or technique or whatever it may be. Really important to really, so the athletes understand the whys. I hate the good jobs. I'm at fault for doing it too. Good job, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
What was good about it? Chris has no idea. So he just guesses when he tries to repeat it. No, good job, Chris. I really like the way you did blah, blah, blah. Now we're providing very constructive feedback.
Hey, I have a 9-year-old that if I don't give the why, he's going to outsmart me. Just point blank. If I don't give him the why, he's not going to take what I said seriously because there's no depth behind it. It's just, hey, good job, like you said, or don't do that, or do this instead. But why? Well, but also, I think it's also a good teaching moment because let's use a football play, for example, right? Well, why would you throw it? Why would you throw it here when, this player was coming across the middle and you could, how it helps them think ahead, right? If the concept of, being able to understand if I take this action, this is what's going to then be the outcome, and getting them to understand that the kids that can do that, it's like they're already a step ahead, but then how do we get the ones that can't do it yet to that point? Right. Well, my action is going to cause this reaction. Could be a play. It could be if I don't, well, why wouldn't you go through your stretching routine today? Because then you could pull a muscle 20 minutes into this workout we're about to have. Like things like that, like the cause and the effect, I think is so important to get kids and coaches to be able to communicate then to these kids so that they truly understand, okay, why do I have to do this drill that coach is putting me through right now? Well, it's because when we have our game on Friday, it's going to help this certain scenario that could exist, right? So just, I don't know, that holistic way of thinking is something I'm a believer in, and I think it's helped kids that I work with out. So know if that resonates with you guys at all, but the two questions I have left, one is essentially just, what are some main takeaways, and switching gears to the parent, that we can arm them with, so that they can help do two things, right? Obviously work with their child, but then also communicate better with the child's coach. So I guess maybe we just, and then the last piece is, what exists today? Like, what resources are out there today that coaches have access to? Probably not enough, not much. And maybe what could we do in the future to increase that?
The first one is have meetings with the parents at the beginning of the season, and have a parent coach contract, so that they understand what is expected of them and what is not expected of them, so that if there are issues, you can come back to that. And then the second one is obviously the national governing bodies, and they do have limited resources, but a lot of them do. And then you have things like Aspen Institute, Positive Coaching Alliance, things like that, where there are a number of sports organizations out there to provide support. But
yeah. And I think, when you talk about parents, families, caregivers, this can be possibly should be something about your something integral to a coaching philosophy, and this is kind of holistic support for developing athletes and individuals. But yeah, Tim had alluded to earlier in the talk about having parent family meetings leading up to the beginning of the season. Embedded in that could be something like a contract. These are what my expectations are out of athletes. This is what my expectations are out of parents. Some sports may require more tangible support than others. You're going to be needing to get your child athlete to certain spots for practice. They're going to be needing this type of equipment or shoe, whatever, footwear, whatever it might be. Knowing that those are needs and expectations, communicating that up front, establishing like a communication network or platform in some way. Do they know they can approach you after practice, or do you not prefer that? Are there other spaces that they can find you? Should they consult with you? Maybe you could set up a remind thread, or maybe there's Stack or something like that. Are you going to set that up? It may be beneficial to do so. I think also early in the season, if you prompt athletes, whether it's a practice or performance issue, maybe it's an injury issue, maybe it's an equipment issue, maybe it's a time thing. But prompt them to go home, talk to your parents, families about this. Let them know what's going on, and then, let me know what they say. Like, prompt that, even if it's indirect and the athlete's kind of being a liaison between you two. But I think establishing that openness to communication. I mean, I think you don't have to open yourself up fully. Text me whenever you want. Call me at all hours of the day. Just walk up to me during the middle of practice. You don't have to open yourself up fully to still demonstrate that you want to triangulate communication. So again, team meetings, athlete, parent, coach meetings before the season. It can be like formative during the season, like what's working, what's not. Not that parents and families necessarily set your training calendar or techniques on their side, but maybe you can get some basic feedback mid-season, after season. And as a coach, I think you will adapt and grow and evolve with like efficiency when you take that approach. As far as what's available to parents and families, there are some national governing bodies out there when it comes to coaching. There's the Positive Coaching Alliance. There is, I'm going to forget some of the abbreviations and whatnot, but there's the high school coaching organization that offers a lot of the education and modules when it comes to like CPR or concussions. I can't remember the name of that, but they have a lot of certifications and courses you need to take in this. If you kind of drill down into some of their websites, sometimes you can find something related to like mental skills, behavioral strategies, including those with neurodivergent athletes, but I feel confident saying it is limited. You might get a PDF, which I'm not minimizing the effect of PDFs or checklists, but that's one of the reasons that Tim and I were prompted to write the Reach Every Athlete book. We wrote the book, but is that, I'm personally not a good self-promoter or marketer. I don't really have a business mind. So have I gone on like a book tour with that? No, I haven't. Neither has Tim. Is that getting into all the hands and spaces that it needs to? So to answer the question, circle back, there are some resources. If you drill down a bit into some of those governing bodies, you can find some, but it's very limited, and it's still not given the emphasis and attention that technical skill development, like professional development, is given, or like I said, like CPR and concussion. And I'm not minimizing that stuff in any way, but the psychological, behavioral, working with neurodivergent athletes, it hasn't ascended to that level of like critical importance in the minds of administrators, whoever makes those decisions on the certifications and knowledge necessary for coaching.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like a certification program though would be great, and it's the individual coach that has to take the initiative to want to become certified in whatever it is. But then it's also the organizations, the school districts, the programs to almost mandate it for their, as a qualification for their coaches to be able to then coach the respective teams.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. And there can be a breakdown there. I'm going to, this is maybe a loose example or illustration, but Tim offered to give for free coaching seminars and workshops, and gets shut down. I have offered to be a sports psychology consultant, like for local high school teams. And the message I get back is, well, there's already a guidance counselor at the school. And it's like, we're not really connecting on the need there. And maybe the importance. And when it boils down to it, it's just, there's limited time for me and probably Tim too, to dig our heels in and try to, make our case further. And so, there's a disconnect between awareness of the need and some of the I guess the professional development opportunities that are out there.
For sure. Well, there's certainly a lot of work to do, and I hope that the platforms that we're trying to create and this platform helps get the word out that there is that gap and helps bridge it a little bit more.
I agree, Derek, and I appreciate the work that you're doing in kind of disseminating some of this material.
You guys as well. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate your and Tim's time. And hey, you know what? There's been more that we can talk about in future episodes too that's come out of this discussion. So
no doubt, there's several items that could be unpacked further.
For sure. Thanks again, Chris. I appreciate it.
You bet, Derek. Take care.